Amir, welcome to the GigaOm podcast. Appreciate you joining us today. Looking forward to hearing about how you became the CEO and founder of Alkira and what you're seeing in the market today. So thanks for joining.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me.
So I always like to start off with, no one went to CEO school. You either have to start off by doing all of the jobs and becoming the CEO, or literally doing every job and founding the company and then becoming the CEO. So maybe just walk us through your background, where you started, and how you got here today to be CEO.
Well, I started my career in networking about 35 years ago and was working at large companies like Cisco. Cisco was very small when I started. It was about 600 people in 1991, May of 91. And then growth through my career, working for large companies and startups, and kept getting better and better opportunities. So I never got an opportunity to, think about doing my own company up until 2012, when I started with Tela, and that's how I became the CEO by virtue of starting a company. And since then, I've continued. I founded Alkira also, and the co-founder and CEO of Alkira. So here we are.
Nice. So you started out on the networking side. Were you a networking engineer, architect? How did you kind of end up in the networking business?
It's interesting. When I graduated, well, while I was in school, I was always working in the computing centers. And when I joined University of Colorado, I was doing the same thing. And we were quite involved with networking as it stood at that time. There was no interconnection of universities and the government networks, and I used to support those. And Ford Motor Company in Detroit, Dearborn, hired me to help them with their Cisco deployments. Cisco was very new in 1989. And so after that, in 1991, they hired me as a support engineer. So I was one of the very small support teams at Cisco, only about 6 people at that time. And then I grew to become what they called at that time the analyst, customer support analyst, within a year, which was the highest position you could technically achieve in that organization. And then I went on to becoming consulting engineer and product manager and whatnot at multiple companies and startups as well.
Got it. Yeah. So you started off on the customer side, right?
Yeah.
Which I think was very interesting, right? You start off the customer side, then you went to the vendor side.
Yes.
So and then you founded Vitella. Tell us a little bit about Vitella and what you guys were doing there, and then what was the customer problem at the time back in 2012 after spending all of that time with customers at Cisco? What did you see was the main challenge customers were having?
Yeah, so when we were talking to customers, they all were complaining about the performance issues with applications as the applications were starting to grow, and some of them were starting to move into the cloud. If you were working from home, you would get 100 megabits connection or higher at a very low cost, and your performance was much better. When you went to work at the office, not necessarily as good, because there were maybe 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 people at office, and the bandwidth was constrained. Even though the SLA on the MPLS side was very strong, it was costly and it was lower performance. And on the internet side, it was very low cost, high performance, but there was no SLA. So we decided that as business class internet was coming up, why don't we marry both the technologies, MPLS and internet, and secure them using one fabric. And then while you do that, you still have to seamlessly tie the networks with your on-premise locations, so all the branches, data centers, remote users, and whatnot. And so that's how we started thinking about the problem. Created a very large-scale secure fabric, because as you remember, if you created a secure fabric with IPsec, the key distribution was an issue. A lot of people always had one key and used it for years as a static key. So we innovated and we came up with a mechanism of distributing keys, in a dynamic fashion, so that you could upgrade the keys every minute if you wanted to. So it would take a few minutes, for the traffic to all be on the new key as we distributed the new key. So and the way we did it was that you would send your key as a router to all the other routers, and other routers would start using that key. So during that time, we would keep using the old keys. So I could go into a lot more details there, but essentially it was a secure fabric where we, the other major thing was that we decoupled the tunnels from interfaces, and decoupled the control plane from the data plane, in terms that the routing convergence would take place in the background rather than be directly proportional to how things were happening at the link level. So that gave us consistent convergence across, no matter how big a deployment it was. So we did a lot of innovation from securing the infrastructure perspective, as well as scaling the infrastructure perspective, which had never been done before. Simple thing on the internet: if you have MTU, you don't know when the traffic would start getting dropped if you were running with a certain size of packets. And but you cannot do ICMP requests, because majority of the providers drop those. So how do you address that problem if you want to determine if the MTU has changed? So if something stopped working, we had an algorithm. Because it was a secure fabric, we discovered what the MTU was inside those tunnels. So a lot of small innovations and integrations, along with the big ones, where we revamped the routing protocol to distribute QoS parameters and whatnot. And it became a very likable solution by the customers. And of course, because Cisco has been deployed for so long, and Junipers, and you had to interoperate with all of those existing technologies. And on the other side, you had to connect to the clouds, as the clouds were coming up as well. So it was a wide area networking solution. We called it software-defined wide area networking. Before that, there was no concept of that. Software-defined networking existed, but that was more at the campus and backbone level. But nobody was thinking about doing SD-WAN type thing for wide area networking. So it has become very popular, as you know. It still continues to be a very popular technology. The team did an awesome job with the execution. It still continues to be the leading offering from Cisco for their customers on the wide area networking side.
Nice. So that, I remember those days. The rage was all SDN, SD-WAN. It was all about virtualizing your network. It was all about distributed networks. And a lot of customers were trying to figure out, do I need to do this thing now? Can I just wait to see what happens? I think fast forward now, we're in 2024, about 12 years later. Some customers are still haven't done it, and they're still working on it. But that was a good investment for Cisco, because there's a long tail. But there was also the whole NFE conversation that was also very complicated. I think SD-WAN was we'll call it an easy button compared to some of the other SDN technologies that were out there, very complicated to use. So I think SD-WAN did probably the best out of all of those different SDN technologies, whether it was telco, enterprise, mid-market, and it is kind of the thing that's standing today from that whole conversation. And again, still really growing, in the market. So if you kind of look back to when you founded Viptela and the major trend around SD-WAN and distributed networks to Alkira, what was that thing that you saw that was similar in the market, or was it different? Was there a key change happening with customers that you're like, there needs to be another company I need to found that is that's going to stand the test of time here?
That's a very interesting question, because if you think about it, at that time, cloud was taking off, and majority of the environments in the cloud were based on shadow IT. It was not very, very well integrated into the overall IT infrastructure. And when we started digging into how the clouds worked from the networking perspective, we started to realize how many problems there were. So even though it's as a service, but it's as a service for compute and storage and individual components or pieces, versus a cohesive a solution for the enterprises. So when you built the network, you were still stuck with deploying things on your own as virtual machines if you wanted to optimize the cloud. Simple things like number of routes, segmentation, end-to-end policy, routing controls, visibility, day-to operations, troubleshooting. Nothing was built in, right? You had to do it piecemeal. And some of our customers like S&P Global and Koch Industries, you talk to them, and they will tell you that it was a spaghetti mess as you created that network inside the cloud. So first thing is you brought the network to the cloud using your Equinix type facilities across the globe to interconnect your on-premise branches and data centers and remote users to the clouds. And then there were very few overlay type mechanisms available to do things inside the clouds, which did not optimize for how the clouds worked. And every cloud was different, by the way. We are no longer in that standardization era where when the networking was coming up, we created IETF, Internet Engineering Task Force, and other bodies who were doing standardization, to build equipment to be able to interoperate that equipment. Here are the clouds, right? They were all built differently by each one of the cloud providers, and we didn't have time because we were moving so fast. So all these clouds like AWS, Azure, GCP, they work their own way. And, and the poor customer is stuck learning these clouds. And now you have so many alternate cloud providers coming up, like GPU-based clouds or some specific clouds for certain applications. And how on earth could the customers learn all the different clouds? And we saw a glaring problem there. So one piece was optimizing for the clouds and creating a common infrastructure across all of them for networking, making sure it was highly available, reliable. All the pieces that I described were done in the right way, in the enterprise class manner. And the second piece was there were so many raw capabilities in the clouds that you could build a solution on demand for networking, and you could horizontally scale that. So we are leveraging the cloud to not only optimize for multi-cloud deployments, a single cloud or multi-cloud or hybrid cloud deployments, but also offering traditional services from the cloud. Because now you can bring these services to the customers on demand, which could be instantiated within minutes, right? Rather than weeks or months or sometimes years, right? And that type of solution has never existed in the networking industry, and we are able to do that because of utilizing the underlying raw capabilities of the cloud and bringing it in a enterprise class fashion to the customers. Simple things like, disaster recovery. How do you do that if you build your network on your own? Are you keeping track of all the configs and changes which are taking place across your environment? There's no possible way that you're going to keep track of everything. So you needed a solution like ours. And interestingly, if you look at all the alternatives available, they're mostly DIY type solutions. So the customer is still stuck with, cool orchestration, but still figuring out how are they going to do the redundancy, reliability for each one of these environments in a cohesive manner so that they can control it as an enterprise entity, right? And that's where they're struggling. And that's where they fall short. And then they come to us and say, can you please help us out? Because it's getting out of control. If we have to do any change in the network, it's unbelievable because you don't know what's going to break. And so here we come in. We have built a very streamlined infrastructure, which brings all environments together from the cloud, for the clouds, and for non-cloud environments.
Yeah. So let's talk about kind of two scenarios. One customer who's like, hey, I'm in the cloud now. I'm having to manage this. This is starting to become challenging, and I can't actually control and create standards. To your point, the kind of the day two operations, and then the customer who's like, hey, I kind of got it. My people are handling it. Yeah, I could outsource it, but really, I want to make sure I secure it.
Yeah.
Those are the two things that we see a lot from customers. And then the third one is, I'm moving to a cloud, and I'm going to do it, and I'm not going to think about anything else other than moving to the cloud. So I'm not going to think about networking, security, architecture, which is something that we see all the time with customers because they just don't know what they don't know, and they think that the cloud is going to be all of the things that they were sold. And they don't understand that it is table stakes, right? And certainly it'll be fine for some things, like for email. or other things. You also need an anti-phishing solution, right? You do need other things, right? But where do you kind of start to see the complexity within your customers where they start to need something like this to support the day two operations, to support security? Where's that tipping point that you see with customers as they kind of go through their different maturity with cloud?
Yeah, and it depends upon the size of the customer and how they have built their environment. There are two major categories of customers there. Whether it's small or big, doesn't matter. Some new companies are coming up which were born in the cloud. They look at things very differently. And then there are companies who've had the legacy solutions, and there's no way they're going to move out of those legacy environments completely, even though majority of the stuff is moving into the cloud. So for the foreseeable future, we will see them struggling with how to keep those hybrid environments together. So the value proposition is different from those set of customers. Like we have a startup, Techion, which has publicly spoken about it, which provides sales and support services to dealerships, car dealerships, right across the globe. And they were able to cut down.
Right, so like a real physical business.
It's a business, it's a growing business across the globe. Inspired by Tesla. I think there's the founder came from Tesla. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he was the ex-CIO of Tesla or something. And so there, the value prop is that you can cut down the deployment time by 80%, which is huge for new environments which want to accommodate new applications. Even, by the way, I will talk about AI. Those applications have to come up very, very quickly. And then there are other sets of customers who are trying to create these hybrid environments, and they need to know how to integrate with existing infrastructure. How do they extend their segmentation? Or if they go through M&A, how do they do that? If they onboard partners, how do they do that? And these are all legacy solutions which are available in the industry. And if you listen to some of the talks that S&P Global has done, Guru, who's the VP of Global Infrastructure, Cloud, and Networking and Security for S&P Global, he will tell you that there were so many point products they had to use before Alkira, and there's only Alkira which is able to bring everything together in a seamless manner, right? He cannot find anything else out there today which solves all of their major issues in networking. So those are the two different categories of customers, and they all try to do it on their own, and thinking that it's going to be easy, and either they realize it very quickly, or they realize that at some point that, oops, this is not going to be able to scale for us. We as a team will have to hire many more people, experts in different areas, and they have to collaborate with each other and come together. And the other trend that we are seeing is that the lines between networking, security, and cloud are starting to blur.
Yep.
And networking and cloud team. I'm sorry, the cloud and security teams, they move much faster than networking teams today.
Yep.
And the poor networking guys are trying to figure out, how do I build my network in the cloud or to the cloud or all these hybrid environments, and they are taking a long time, and the CIOs don't like that, the CEOs don't like that. So for the first time, the networking teams are able to move faster than the cloud or security teams for deployment. And that has never happened before, right? So the customers are so excited about it that, hey, if I want to bring up an AI environment today, and if I really truly want to secure it, because AI is also at where shadow IT for cloud used to be, right? There are point products which are getting deployed. At some point, IT will realize that we need to bring it all together. And some of the customers are forward-looking, and they've already started deploying it using networks, right? So let's say LLM services, right? They put it behind Alkira, and they selectively expose them through segmentation to different sets of people. So whether it's departments within the organization, so that you are very restricted in who can access what services, or it's exposing those LLM services to certain select partners, right? So we provide a very elegant extranet as a service capability, where you can control through routing in a very granular manner with even microsegmentation to expose those services to a very select group of people. And the boundaries are not constrained. You can be global within minutes or hours, right? If you try to do it with any existing mechanism today, it would take you, a long, long time to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So customers love it, right? They have complete control over things, and slowly other customers are going to start realizing that they need to have very controlled, integrated IT environments for AI, and they no longer will be able to get away with these point products with individual teams utilizing it their own way, right? Then you don't have enterprise grade policy. You're not able to meet your compliance requirements, and it becomes a nightmare, right? How do you do compliance in that environment, right? So common policies, common way of deploying things, services across multiple environments is very, very important. And how do you make sure these environments are highly available, right? You get into the same old problem of point connectivity, right? And so that's where customers are so excited about it, that they are starting to see that, because some of the customers who saw that coming in the cloud, when they went from shadow IT to a properly deployed networking environment to integrate clouds with their existing IT infrastructure, customers are either already the forward-looking customers, or sooner or later they will start to realize how important that is.
So I think there's kind of three scenarios, like you said. The customers in the individual cloud who needs to be able to easily deploy a network, right? You have the multi-cloud, which is just, let's just say, just like we say with every customer, okay, great, this is getting really complex now. How are you going to build standards and process?
Yeah.
And then the third one is security, which is the kind of the I think earlier you talked about the fabric of MPLS and the internet, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing, right? You have to build a fabric across your whole ecosystem that integrates. But if you kind of think about like the business user and the executive here, really why they're doing this is because it helps enable their people, right? It's really about people enablement and process. Because if you're going to have more than one cloud, you cannot standardize on that one cloud, right? You have to standardize and create your own standard, and then you have to build that standard across, which then means that you can build a better operating model for your teams to operate, right? You can then control better. So maybe talk a little bit about how you're working with executives and business leaders on enabling their people. A big part of why people like technology is it solves technical problems, but at the end of the day, it's got to solve some people and process problems. So maybe talk a little bit about what you're seeing maybe from some of your, like you said, your forward-leading customers, and what they're doing organizationally versus, kind of the mainstream customer who's trying to wrap their head around this and really just trying to enable their people in this market.
Yeah, and some of the customers who are more forward-looking, they're bringing these organizations together and putting them under the same leader rather than individual leaders, and that leader is responsible for multiple areas, right? And primarily that is because of the agility, the on-demand nature of how you need to move forward is so fundamentally important in today's world, because you have to move at the speed of business and not at the speed of technology hindering things. And that's what we are starting to see is, as I said earlier, the lines between security, cloud, and networking are blurring, and there is cross-pollination between these organizations to work better together, because that's the only way we are going to be able to solve that problem. And this brings up a very interesting point, because we've been talking about either individually deploying technologies or SASE type architectures where you integrate security and one vendor is trying to offer security with integrated with connectivity. And there are challenges with that, because no one vendor, as you know, historically has been good at everything. People are either good at connectivity or they're good at security. And if they have tried to intertwine those, they have failed quite often. And even if they have succeeded, they have succeeded in offering a few services integrated with connectivity. So where we come in is that enterprises or customers don't need one way of securing infrastructure. They need many different ways, right? Whether it's a firewall from Palo Alto or Zscaler for, ZTNA or, other types of technologies. And there are many other security technologies that need to be streamlined and deployed together for enterprise class security, right? So for mid-sized customers, maybe sometimes you can get away with the SASE type architectures. So here's what we call the best of breed architecture, right? Where you have common connectivity across all clouds and hybrid environments and remote users. But at the same time, streamlined with existing firewall vendors or other types of security vendors, as well as Infoblox type services where you do DDI, IPAM services, load balancers. So all these services need to come together in a very streamlined fashion. And what happens is in today's architecture, these services, they get deployed in a very suboptimal manner from a cost perspective as well. So let's say some of our customers have reduced their security footprint or firewall footprint alone by, they've reduced it by 80%. So there's a lot of cost savings in if you have a common infrastructure and if you properly integrate the services with that common connectivity infrastructure, then you not only have the common infrastructure from supportability perspective or control perspective, but also you can end up doing a lot of cost optimizations using that. So that's where customers' eyes open up when they go, oh, wow, I deployed it in Singapore, and all of a sudden my firewall capacity needs dropped by, because I don't have to have firewalls in line, as an example. And today, if you want to say, select a firewall and want the traffic to come back through that firewall, you want to make sure your network infrastructure is ready for that. Right. And simple examples, right? And how do you streamline those services deployments? We integrate, consistent hashing and many other mechanisms to make sure that your services are deployed in a very optimal manner. And that's not possible today. And if you even have SASE, you can integrate it in this environment from some vendors, right? So you can bring traffic through that into other services as well. So integration of services is very important, fundamentally important, and that needs to be a key part of the infrastructure. That's where we have put in a lot of emphasis. So on the SD-WAN side, on the on-premise side, we integrate with IPsec, different vendors on SD-WAN like Cisco, VeloCloud, Versa, Silver Peak, Fortinet, etc. And you can even come in through high-speed connectivity like Direct Connect or Express Route into our infrastructure. And it's a virtual infrastructure, mind you, right? And we are still able to do all of that stuff. And from the firewall perspective, we have Palo Alto, Checkpoint, Cisco, Fortinet, and others. And on the cloud side, you have to be able to connect to any cloud seamlessly. So we have created a very unique, simple graphical user interface through which customers can come in and not only configure, but visualize and be able to troubleshoot through that, their whole environment visually, right? And that's so difficult to achieve. You have to have many different tools to be able to achieve that today. Routing controls, policy, even simple things like if you want to do ping and trace route or packet capture in the networking environment, that's a nightmare today. How do you do that across multiple environments, right? And people don't realize the importance of a well-integrated solution, from that perspective. And that's where we come in and we help them out significantly so that they have total control over their infrastructure and they can streamline all these services, how they're deployed across not only on-premise environments, but also across the cloud environments.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really important thing for our listeners to hear. I was talking to Andrew Green, one of our networking analysts who does our networking as a service radar. And we were talking about how, we have cloud, we have IaaS, we have PaaS, we have SaaS.
Yeah.
The network is being turned into a commodity via the cloud, but it is not being managed to help support the customers with their use cases.
Exactly.
So the challenge, so essentially, network as a service is cloud as a service for your network, right? And that helps you kind of build capacity and manage the workloads that you have in a cloud or multiple clouds. But I think your point is really well taken. You need a underlying infrastructure, which is the network, right, or the NAS, depending on which kind of architecture you're going to choose.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna just say, hey, like my network needs to be this big, and I'm going to pay this much to have all these things in it, that's one way to do it. Or you could do it another way, which is use what you need.
Yeah.
Right. And that is the difference between I'll call it like a network, legacy network approach versus a modern approach, which again, you have to choose what you need. But if you need to have different types of capacity, or you want to manage your security and your attacks, like you said, in SASE environments, manage all these different tools, you do not need to provision that much infrastructure, and you can save a lot of money. And that's a really important thing for customers to understand. So I'm gonna say, listen to the last couple minutes here after you listen to the podcast, because this network as a service is a really cool topic. And it's not something that that we created as a term. It is just the infrastructure table stakes for network now, right? And you can manage it based on your load. Whether it's Black Friday or you have a bunch of attackers attacking you, like, just turn it off. That's a super powerful thing, Amir. So thank you for bringing that up. I'm glad you brought it up.
And you bring up another good point, which is, network as a service has been defined so many different ways by so many different vendors. Majority of the times, vendors end up doing a bit of orchestration, and they start calling it network as a service, which is it's not. You need to be able to service the customer's needs on demand. And if you're not able to do that in an elastic fashion, then it's not meeting the requirements of network as a service. And that's why we were hesitant in using that term earlier on, because it's so blurry. But now more and more, as we talk to the customers, and they're starting to tell us that this is true networking as a service, right? Which has never existed before. And the reason we are able to do it is because of end-to-end virtualization, by putting our abstracted infrastructure inside clouds, our routers, our nodes, right? So that we can provide that consistent experience across all hybrid multi-cloud environments and remote users, right? So that has not happened before, right? So it's really exciting time for us, because we are bringing something to the customers which will completely transform how networks are consumed. It's like, once you're a Tesla customer, no matter how many people hate it, you love it, and you just love the capability that they bring to the table. And it's a completely new way of building things, right? And you can get, over the internet software upgrades to get your features. Even your doors are, tweaked based on the remote software capabilities, right? And that's what we are talking about, is completely changing the industry in how things are consumed from the networking perspective. And we are super excited about that, as you can tell. And our customers are super excited about it. We just had a cab in Dallas last week with our customer advisory board in Dallas. And customers were so passionate. They were telling us, bringing out more and more of their needs as to how we can evolve it and which areas we can. So a lot more is coming, from that perspective, from our technology.
Yeah, I think just like we talked about DevOps and platform engineering and that whole kind of movement. Network that was enabled by infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, right? And that's why networking has kind of, customers don't want to touch the network because it's working, right? but they do want to modernize it. So this is the last kind of bastion, even though the technology's been around for a while. Now it's about, okay, great. Now all of these consumers and all of these constituents I'm building and modern teams I'm building, now we can unleash the network, and that is super exciting. So thanks for bringing that up, because that drives a whole new set of customers within the enterprise who can really take advantage of the application that they're building, right?
Yeah, and we enabled a lot of things using APIs or Terraform type capabilities. But again, we had to learn every environment independently. And our DevSecOps teams were as good as the underlying technology capabilities. And that's where we come in and say, you can still do that, but now you don't have to learn so many different environments. A network engineer can be an expert in BGP and OSPF and routing and policy controls and whatnot. They can come in and control their environment now. They don't have to understand how compute is deployed or storage is deployed or what kind of an image they need to manage in the cloud. We are taking all of that away from the customers and making them giving them time back from that perspective, so that they can come up with their own strategy for extending their networks in their own way. And by the way, I want to distinguish from that perspective also that we are a network infrastructure as a service. we allow the customers to build their networks on their own, the way they desire to build them, and integrate their own services, whether they have Palo Alto, Cisco, Checkpoint, whatever it is, right? They can select their own services. They can bring their own services, or they can deploy it based on the license that we give them. So it's a very flexible mechanism, and customers love that because they didn't have that flexibility. In certain environments, they were restricted to using certain capabilities, and that's very important.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that, Amir. I think the last topic is AI. It's everyone's favorite topic.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear what you guys are doing on AI, but also what you're planning on doing and where you see customer momentum, right? Because we're still early days, just like, we're still kind of early days in SD-WAN. 10 years later, we'll look back on this and be like, we're just at the beginning. So tell me about what you're seeing with AI, what you're seeing with customers, and how the AI kind of strategies and applications are coming downstream to network, but also pushing the network, pushing upstream to the AI workloads.
Yeah, and that's a very important distinction that you make there. AI for networking and networking for AI.
Correct.
And that's how we are introducing it to the so your audience can coin that. Attribute it to us that, hey, networking for AI and AI for networking. And there is a very clear distinction. AI is putting, there are requirements from AI services, right, which are for the networks. How do you deploy AI using the networking solutions? And that's where a lot of our customers who are more forward-looking, I described, right, they could have LLM type services or machine learning capabilities. And they want a flexible, secure environment, which is elastic, on demand, that they can grow or shrink according to their own needs, because they're experimenting a lot with AI technology today. And there are not many technologies, at least I don't know of any other technology where you can, accommodate those requirements with such an ease of use, right, that you could deploy this infrastructure within a couple of hours to be able to accommodate those services, right? And that's what we call networking for AI, where your network can accommodate the AI application requirements, right? Then there's AI for networking, which is how do you improve your, own offering, utilizing either generative AI or other types of capabilities offered by AI. And that's where, there's anomaly detection or analytics or, documentation. That is table stakes, where you will have to integrate those technologies for making the network engineers or the IT engineers' life easier to be able to understand. Like, if you call us for a simple question, which is configuration related, why should you not be able to ask that to the AI engine and get an answer right away, rather than calling so both teams benefit. The customer benefits as well as the vendor benefits, because we can focus on more important questions. And similarly, from the AI security postures perspective, anomalies perspective, we can integrate AI to give you better answers and make recommendations. Now, as far as AI is concerned, to be able to make decisions or influence the network is concerned, I think we are far away from that. We are not close, because once you make a tweak using automated mechanisms in the forwarding plane, other than well-defined way of doing things, which can be easier to troubleshoot, or consistently, I would say consistently you can troubleshoot those environments. It's so fundamentally important, because your network is down, all your applications are down. And you could be losing tens or hundreds of millions of dollars an hour if that happens, right? So you want to make sure that you're introducing a technology in a very careful, staggered way, so that over time, by experimenting with it as to where it can be beneficial from making those decisions in the forwarding infrastructure, whether it's security forwarding or networking related forwarding, it needs to be very carefully integrated. And we will be experimenting with that over time, because you want to make sure that whatever you offer is very highly available at the same time for the customers. Right? So those are the areas where we will be investing AI for networking and networking for AI, and at the same time experimenting with how AI can be used to make forwarding decisions, to make complicated decisions, which could be also trouble. You can easily troubleshoot if something goes wrong. And I don't think that we are there. And again, it may be that we find out something is, coming out quicker than we expected, but at least we haven't seen anything yet from that perspective.
Yeah, I liked your comment around networking for AI, right? It's another use case for based need for networking. So if you're doing a lot of testing, you don't know what your capacity and demand needs are, leveraging some type of NAS makes a lot of sense because you can control the cost. And control the deployment and management of it. And then to your point on the AI piece, or the AI for networking piece, like I said earlier, no one wants to touch the network. So be careful of the network. It's not that it's brittle, just we got it all set up the way we want it. So
you need something like Alkira so that you can dynamically change things in the network to be able to expand or shrink based on your needs without you having to touch point products and tunnels and filters, and it doesn't work. So you have to have a streamlined mechanism for that.
And I think with a lot of infrastructure technology, it's finding the needles in the haystack, right? To your point. So that's really the main use case we're seeing across infrastructure. I think we will see more intelligent infrastructure as we kind of move along, but that is something that customers do not want happening in production. They're happy to test it out in a POC or environment, but they're very careful. So I think right now what we're recommending, to your point, is just leverage these AI tools to get more information to make the right decision, but the human is still very much in charge and will be in charge for a long time, right? Okay, Amir, well, thank you for joining the podcast. Appreciate your insight. And, thanks for joining the CEO podcast here on a Monday afternoon.
My pleasure. And thank you so much, man. Always nice seeing you. And thank you for, having me on this podcast. So